On the afternoon of July 3, 2023 at 4:31 p.m., a call came into the New York State Office of the Attorney General's Office of Special Investigation, OSI, from the New Rochelle Police Department, NRPD, regarding a man observed eating food at a grocery store without paying. Store manager at New Rochelle Farms grocery store, located on North Street in New Rochelle, Westchester County, reported that the man, identified as Jarrel Garris, had consumed produce in the store's vestibule and was walking away when officers arrived. Officer Gabriella Chiavari arrived first, then Officer Carrie Bird, and shortly thereafter Detective Stephen Kahn.
I'm having a conversation with you. Look, we just had just a phone call that's something that you were inside the store and you ate some items. Is that true? Not true?
6 to 7. You want to see?
Hey.
Down Monroe.
Hey.
Careful.
Listen, we just want to have a conversation. He wants to press. Yes, he wants to press charges. Yes.
What are you doing in the store?
Yeah.
You in the store?
Yeah, he wants to press charges, but he's good.
What?
But yeah, just come over. Just come over here. Come over here.
The officers approached Garris on foot. He did not respond to their questions and kept walking. Detective Kahn attempted to place handcuffs on him. A struggle ensued on the pavement outside the store. According to body-worn camera, BWC footage, during that struggle, Officer Bird was on the ground trying to control Garris's legs, while Garris was standing over her, and Officer Chiavari held her taser but did not fire it. Moments later, BWC recording shows Garris on the ground with his hands reaching toward Officer Bird's holstered firearm. Detective Kahn shouted "gun" and fired one shot.
He's got a gun!
The bullet entered the back of Garris's neck and rendered him motionless. He was declared brain dead on July 7th, and on July 10th life support was removed and he died. New York State Attorney General. This section sets out the factual timeline and actions of July 3rd. The interaction began as a report of an alleged petty theft, escalated into physical confrontation, and ended with a police officer using deadly force. OSI later audited these facts and concluded that a prosecutor would not be able to disprove beyond a reasonable doubt that the use of deadly force by Detective Kahn was justified under New York law. Before his name became part of a state investigation, Jarrel Garris was known by family and friends as a man struggling to find stability in his life. Born and raised in New Rochelle, New York, Jarrel grew up in the same community where his life would later end. He had attended local schools, and those close to him described him as someone who cared deeply for his family, even as he faced personal challenges. According to available public records and the Attorney General's report, Jarrel was 37 years old at the time of his death. Like many residents of New Rochelle, he lived within walking distance of small shops, parks, and residential streets where everyone knew each other by name. He often visited the nearby grocery store, New Rochelle Farms, the same place where the fatal incident occurred. Jarrel's life, while largely private, was not without hardship. The Attorney General's investigation noted that in the months before his death, he experienced homelessness and mental health struggles, issues that sometimes placed him in contact with local law enforcement. His mother, Leslie Garris, later told reporters that Jarrel had been a good man who didn't deserve to die that way. Her words reflect a deep pain shared by many families in similar cases, the loss of a loved one in circumstances that remain difficult to reconcile. On the day of the incident, Jarrel had entered the grocery store on North Street around 4:15 p.m. The report stated that he ate some fruit inside the store without paying, and then began to walk away, carrying no weapons, no stolen goods, and no visible threat to others. This minor incident, one that could have ended with a citation or warning, became the moment that changed everything. The New Rochelle Police Department, like many agencies across the country, had protocols for responding to alleged petty theft or trespassing. Typically, officers were expected to assess the situation calmly and de-escalate when possible. But on July 3, 2023, the events unfolded rapidly. 3 officers, Detective Stephen Kahn, Officer Gabriella Chiavari, and Officer Carrie Bird, arrived within moments of one another. Their body-worn cameras would later provide the only comprehensive visual record of what followed. This section focuses not only on who Jarrel Garris was, but also on the ordinary circumstances of that summer day: grocery store visit, a brief encounter, and a chain of actions that spiraled into tragedy. For his family, Jarrel's humanity is what they want remembered most. To them, he was not defined by the final moments caught on police cameras, but by the years of life that came before: a son, a neighbor, and a man trying to rebuild. When officers from the New Rochelle Police Department arrived at the North Street grocery store on July 3, 2023, the situation began as a routine call. The report described a man eating food inside the store without paying, a minor offense that typically did not require an aggressive response. But what followed unfolded within minutes and would become a case examined at the highest levels of the state's justice system. Officer Gabriella Chiavari arrived first, followed by Officer Carrie Bird and Detective Stephen Kahn. Each wore a body-worn camera, as required by department policy, providing investigators later with an unbroken visual and audio timeline. According to the Attorney General's Office of Special Investigation, OSI, the officers spotted Jarrel Garris outside the store and approached him on foot. Officer Chiavari attempted to engage Garris in conversation, asking about the alleged food theft. Garris, however, did not respond and continued walking down the sidewalk. Detective Kahn then reached for Garris's arm to detain him. Within seconds, what began as verbal contact became physical. The body camera footage showed the three officers and Garris struggling near the curb. Officer Bird fell to the ground as she tried to grab Garris's legs, while Officer Chiavari drew her taser but did not discharge it. Garris remained standing for a brief moment, appearing to resist being handcuffed. The footage captured Detective Kahn shouting commands while Garris turned slightly toward Officer Bird, who was still on the ground. It was then, investigators later confirmed, that Kahn yelled, "Gun!" believing that Garris was reaching for Bird's holstered firearm. In a single motion, Kahn fired one round from his service weapon. The bullet struck Garris in the back of the neck. The entire encounter, from initial contact to the fatal shot, lasted less than a minute. The sound of the gunshot was followed by silence, then shouting as officers called for medical assistance. Garris collapsed onto the pavement motionless. Officers immediately began to render aid and requested emergency medical services. The OSI report later detailed every frame of the incident, noting that Kahn's use of deadly force was predicated on his perception that Garris was attempting to grab the officer's gun. However, investigators also acknowledged the difficulty in fully determining intent during fast-moving physical confrontations. In the aftermath, officers secured the scene, collected evidence, and notified superiors. Police tape was placed around the area as witnesses began to gather, many of them shoppers who had seen parts of the encounter. What began as a call about stolen fruit had ended with a man shot in broad daylight. This section captures the moment the situation escalated beyond control, the clash of rapid judgment, fear, and force that turned a routine police encounter into a fatal confrontation. In the seconds following the gunshot, the scene outside New Rochelle Farm shifted from confrontation to chaos. Body-worn camera footage, later reviewed by the Office of Special Investigation, OSI, captured the officers' reactions: startled voices, urgent commands, and immediate calls for help. Detective Stephen Kahn, who had fired the single fatal round, shouted for medical assistance while the other officers moved to check on Jarrel Garris, who now lay motionless on the pavement. According to the official report, Officer Gabriella Chiavari immediately radioed for emergency medical services, EMS. The three officers then began first aid procedures, placing pressure on the wound and attempting to maintain Garris's airway until paramedics arrived. Witnesses described the moment as tense and confusing. Some bystanders stood frozen in disbelief, while others began recording on their phones. Within minutes, EMS personnel arrived at the scene. They took over medical care and quickly transported Garris to Westchester Medical Center, the nearest trauma hospital. The bullet had entered the back of his neck and caused catastrophic damage to his spinal cord and brainstem. The report stated that despite the severity of his injury, doctors worked for hours to stabilize him. Garris was placed on life support as his family members began to arrive at the hospital. That night, the New Rochelle Police Department issued a preliminary statement confirming that an officer-involved shooting had occurred, but details were scarce. Investigators from the Westchester County District Attorney's Office and later, the New York State Attorney General's Office of Special Investigation were both notified in accordance with state law, which mandates independent review whenever police use deadly force resulting in death or serious injury. As the investigation began, Garris remained in critical condition. His family kept vigil by his bedside for several days. On July 7, 2023, he was declared brain dead, and 3 days later on July 10th, his family made the painful decision to remove life support. The official cause of death was a single gunshot wound to the neck. Outside the hospital, community members and local activists began to gather, calling for transparency and accountability. To them, the image of a man killed after a minor shoplifting complaint was a tragedy that reflected deeper issues of policing, race, and mental health in America. For the officers involved, the following hours and days were marked by mandatory administrative leave, interviews, and evidence collection. Detectives photographed the scene, secured the firearm, and cataloged the physical evidence, all of which would later be submitted to the Attorney General's office for review. This section captures the immediate human and procedural response and the desperate efforts to save a life, the swift activation of investigative protocols, and the quiet devastation that followed a single irreversible act. In accordance with New York Executive Law Paragraph 70B, the Office of Special Investigation, OSI, within the New York State Attorney General's office assumed jurisdiction over the case involving the death of Jarrel Garris. This independent division was created to review all incidents in which police officers may have caused the death of a civilian, ensuring impartiality and transparency beyond local department oversight. Immediately after the shooting, OSI investigators responded to New Rochelle to begin their inquiry. Their work included collecting body-worn camera footage, interviewing witnesses, analyzing physical evidence, and reviewing medical and forensic reports. According to the OSI's official report, investigators obtained and examined video from all 3 responding officers, Detective Stephen Kahn, Officer Gabriella Chiavari, and Officer Carrie Bird. Each camera provided a unique angle of the confrontation, helping establish an accurate sequence of events from the initial contact to the discharge of the firearm. The footage showed the encounter began calmly, with officers approaching Garris in the grocery store's parking area. However, it escalated quickly as Kahn attempted to detain him. During the struggle, Garris appeared to resist handcuffing. When Officer Bird fell to the ground, Garris was briefly positioned above her. In those seconds, Kahn shouted, "Gun!" believing Garris was attempting to grab Bird's service weapon. Kahn immediately drew his firearm and fired a single shot. To assess whether that action was legally justified, OSI reviewed forensic evidence from the scene, including photographs, bullet trajectory analysis, and the recovered shell casing. The Westchester County Medical Examiner's Office confirmed the bullet entered the back of Garris's neck, consistent with the footage. Toxicology results indicated Garris had controlled substances in his system, though the OSI emphasized that this fact alone did not determine justification. Investigators also interviewed multiple witnesses, including store employees and nearby residents who heard or saw parts of the confrontation. Their accounts largely matched the video evidence, that the struggle was brief, chaotic, and ended abruptly with one shot. After months of review, OSI concluded that while the incident was tragic, there was insufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Detective Kahn's use of deadly force was unjustified under New York Penal Law, Paragraph 3530, which allows officers to use such force when they reasonably believe it necessary to protect themselves or others from serious injury or death. The report underscored that the decision did not mean the use of force was ideal or without consequence. Rather, it reflected the narrow legal standard prosecutors must meet in criminal cases involving police officers. This section highlights the painstaking process of investigation, a methodical effort to separate perception from proof, emotion from evidence, and to determine, through law, whether a tragedy constitutes a crime. Following months of thorough investigation, the New York State Attorney General's Office of Special Investigation, OSI, released its official findings regarding the fatal shooting of Jarrel Garris. The report provided a detailed account of the evidence reviewed, the legal standards applied, and the reasoning behind its ultimate conclusion that no criminal charges would be filed against Detective Stephen Kahn, the officer who fired the fatal shot. The OSI began by reaffirming the scope of its mandate under New York Executive Law, Pro 70B, which requires it to investigate every incident in which a police officer may have caused the death of a civilian. Its role is to determine whether there is reasonable cause to believe a crime was committed, a higher legal threshold than public speculation or policy criticism. According to the report, the OSI's analysis relied heavily on body-worn camera footage, which clearly captured the chaotic moments of the encounter. The video showed that Kahn and two other officers attempted to detain Garris after he allegedly stole food from a local grocery store. When Garris resisted, a physical struggle ensued. During that brief scuffle, Officer Carrie Bird fell to the ground, and Garris was seen over her. Kahn then shouted, "Gun!" indicating he believed Garris was reaching for Bird's firearm, and fired a single round into Garris's neck. The forensic evidence supported this sequence. Only one shot was fired, striking Garris from behind as he turned. The medical examiner confirmed that the bullet caused immediate catastrophic injury, resulting in Garris's death. The OSI emphasized that, under New York Penal Law, Part 3530, an officer may use deadly force if they reasonably believe it is necessary to defend themselves or another person from imminent serious physical injury or death. This standard does not require the officer's belief to be correct in hindsight, only that it be objectively reasonable given the circumstances at the time. In this case, OSI concluded that Kahn's belief that Garris was attempting to seize Bird's weapon was reasonable, even if later evidence showed Garris never actually obtained control of the gun. Because of this, prosecutors determined they could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Kahn's use of deadly force was criminally unjustified. The report also addressed broader policy implications, acknowledging community concerns about de-escalation and police accountability. OSI noted that while Kahn's actions did not meet the standard for criminal prosecution, the case raised important questions about training, communication, and the handling of low-level offenses that escalate into deadly confrontations. Finally, the OSI extended condolences to Garris's family, recognizing their grief and calling his death a profound tragedy that underscores the need for continued reform and transparency. The report's conclusion left many in the community unsatisfied. Some viewed it as a fair application of the law, while others saw it as another example of systemic failures in policing. Either way, the Attorney General's findings became a defining moment in the broader debate over the use of force and justice in New York. The release of the Attorney General's report brought a wave of emotions across New Rochelle and beyond. For the family of Jarrel Garris, the conclusion felt like a second blow, a painful reminder of the gap between accountability and justice. Jarrel's mother, Dawn Garris, expressed disbelief that no charges would be filed, saying her son's life had been reduced to a legal technicality. She described him as a gentle soul who deserved help, not bullets. The family's grief was compounded by frustration, as they felt the investigation focused more on justification than prevention. Community members rallied around the family, organizing vigils, marches, and memorials in honor of Garris's life. Candles lined the streets near Lincoln Avenue, where he had been shot. At one memorial, speakers called for changes to police procedure, emphasizing the need for mental health crisis training and de-escalation tactics in encounters involving minor offenses. Local leaders echoed these sentiments. Pastor Raymond Mills, a longtime community advocate, told attendees that justice isn't just about the courtroom. It's about changing the system that keeps producing these tragedies. His words reflected the broader frustration of residents who felt that systemic change remained slow, despite repeated calls for reform. Meanwhile, civil rights organizations, including the NAACP and the Westchester Coalition for Police Accountability, issued statements condemning the outcome. They argued that the report's findings once again highlighted how the legal standard for police use of force often shields officers from criminal responsibility. Activists stressed that the problem lay not only in individual decisions, but in laws that favor police interpretations of danger over civilian rights. The city of New Rochelle faced growing pressure to respond. Mayor Noam Bramson and Police Commissioner Robert Gazzola publicly expressed condolences to the Garris family and pledged to review department protocols. They announced plans for additional de-escalation and implicit bias training, hoping to rebuild community trust. Still, many residents remained skeptical, pointing to previous cases where similar promises faded over time. On social media, the hashtag #OurnJustice for Jarrel Garris began trending across New York. The movement drew attention from national outlets and civil rights activists, reigniting discussions about racial bias, police accountability, and proportionality in law enforcement. Supporters demanded the creation of an independent oversight board for police incidents resulting in civilian deaths. At the same time, others in the community expressed empathy for the officers involved, acknowledging the difficulty of split-second decisions in volatile situations. This divide reflected a broader tension: the struggle to balance empathy for law enforcement with the demand for accountability when fatal mistakes occur. In the months following the report, the Garris family filed a civil lawsuit against the city of New Rochelle and the officers, seeking damages and policy reform. For them, the case was about more than compensation. It was about ensuring that Jarrel's death would lead to meaningful change. Even as time passed, one sentiment remained constant: the city could not return to normal. The death of Jarrel Garris had become more than a single tragedy. It was a mirror reflecting deep-rooted issues in policing, justice, and trust between communities and those sworn to protect them. In the wake of the Attorney General's report and the widespread public response, the story of Jarrel Garris became more than just a single case. It evolved into a symbol of the broader struggle for justice, accountability, and change in American policing. Though official investigations had concluded, the questions his death raised continued to echo across New Rochelle and beyond. For the Garris family, Jarrel's absence remained a daily reminder of what had been lost. His mother, Dawn Garris, became a quiet yet determined advocate for reform. She attended city council meetings, community panels, and police reform discussions, urging leaders to make sure no other family has to live this nightmare. Her persistence inspired others, including parents who had lost children in similar circumstances, to speak up about their own experiences with the justice system. In the months that followed, the New Rochelle Police Department implemented new measures in response to community pressure. Officers underwent expanded de-escalation training and scenario-based crisis simulations to improve their response in tense situations. The department also strengthened its mental health partnership programs, pairing officers with social workers for calls involving behavioral crises. City officials introduced a new civilian review board, giving residents more oversight in cases involving use of force. While these changes represented progress, many activists viewed them as only the beginning. They continued to call for statewide legislation to redefine the standards governing police use of force, emphasizing accountability and transparency. Advocacy groups pushed for policies that would require officers to use body cameras in all interactions and to release footage within strict time limits after incidents involving fatalities. Across social media, the Justice for Jarrel Garris campaign remained active, serving as both a memorial and a movement. Artists created murals honoring Jarrel's life, while local students organized discussions about racial equity and community trust. The tragedy had ignited a broader conversation about the role of policing in communities of color, where distrust and fear often overshadow safety and service. In Bartlesville, Jarrel's hometown roots were honored by those who remembered his kindness and humor. Friends described him as someone who could make anyone laugh, even on their worst day. Remembering him this way helped humanize the conversation, reminding the public that beyond every headline and report, there is a person with a life cut short. Over time, the case also became a learning moment for law enforcement professionals. Training seminars and academic programs cited Jarrel's story as an example of how community-police relations can deteriorate without transparency and empathy. Professors at regional universities used it to explore themes of public accountability, legal interpretation, and the ethical dimensions of policing. Although justice, in the legal sense, remained elusive, the pursuit of reform carried Jarrel's legacy forward. For many in New Rochelle, his story stood as a call to action, a reminder that progress is measured not just in policies, but in how a community chooses to learn from its pain. Through grief, activism, and perseverance, Jarrel Garris's name became synonymous with change, a symbol of the ongoing fight to ensure that tragedies like his do not fade quietly into history, but instead inspire a safer, fairer future for everyone. The story of Jarrel Garris stands as a powerful reminder that justice depends on those who refuse to stay silent. Each name, each tragedy represents not just loss, but a call for accountability, transparency, and change. If this story moved you, take action. Support organizations that advocate for police reform, mental health crisis response, and community oversight. Learn about your local policies, attend town meetings, and amplify the voices of families still waiting for justice. True change begins when people stay informed, united, and unwilling to look away. The Garris family continues their fight, not only for Jarrel but for every person whose story deserves to be heard. By sharing his story and demanding reform, you become part of a movement that turns pain into purpose and tragedy into awareness. And if you believe stories like this must keep being told, stories that uncover truth, honor victims, and challenge systems, then make sure to subscribe to Real Crime Pulse. Join us as we continue exploring real cases, real families, and the real fight for justice. Your voice matters. Your awareness matters. Together we keep their stories alive and demand the justice they were denied.